I'm Gareth from Pearl Cameras, and today we're going to be talking about 5 ways you can shoot better video right away. So no need to wait, this is something you can do today. So, let's go! So tip number 1 is lighting. This is so important to shooting, and it's something that can be overlooked when you first start out. So better lighting just equals better shots. When you use lighting, it can create clearer, more professional looking, even kind of sharper looking shots. You just get that sharpness to it, that clearness to it. Whereas when you shoot in somewhere where the lighting's not so good, the shots are less clear, they're a bit muddy, and they just don't look very good. The other thing is that better lit shots are going to give you much more room for color grading in post. So you're going to have much more room to play around with what you want the final look to be. Whereas if you shoot somewhere less well lit, you're not going to have much room to color afterwards, which isn't so much fun. So you want to move to somewhere where the lighting is going to be lighting your subject, it's going to be a well-lit environment. So I'm stood over here by the window, and that's giving me a nice natural source of light, which is lighting me pretty well and giving me a good lighting situation so I can play around in post with color and things like that, which is going to look much better, and it kind of just looks much clearer as well. As opposed to over here where it's much darker, same room. It's not that massive a room either, just we're away from the window now, so it's much darker, I'm much more difficult to see, I'm much less clear, it's a bit muddy, the footage, I'm not really gonna be able to color this in post, in fact, it doesn't look very good at all, so that's the difference. So you can see how important it is to get your lighting right and just move around until you get the lighting on you. Now, if you can't use a window or natural source of light like that, you can always just use an LED light. It's what I use to light most of the videos that we shoot in the studio, and that works really well as well. So it's a nice bright white light, and obviously bounce it around, maybe diffuse it as well. In fact, I'd definitely diffuse it, but that's just another way to light your video, but it's just really important to make sure you're getting enough light into your video, into your shot, so you give yourself enough options for afterwards, and it just makes it look so much better, so much more professional, and just a much better output. Tip number 2 is sound. Now there's a few different facets to this, but generally, sound is actually more important to a video than the video, which sounds kind of weird, but it's definitely true. So for example, this is me talking on the wireless microphones that we use to record these. And now I'm just using the built-in microphone on the camera, and you can really hear the difference. And I'm actually sitting pretty close to the camera. So you can definitely hear a big difference there. So having a proper microphone and having it right next to your subject just gives a slightly more professional sound to things, which in turn makes the video look more professional. It's just the way we process things. We process the sound and the video together. So if one's better, then the other one must be better. So it's a really, really big deal. And I know what you might be thinking, well, my videos don't incorporate anyone talking to camera, so it kind of doesn't matter. But that's just one area of sound. The music you choose has so many implications for how your footage is going to be perceived. So it sets the tone for the kind of thing you want to get. It sets the kind of emotional context, which sounds a bit dramatic, but using the wrong music can actually make your exact same footage look worse. The actual quality appear worse. It's just the way we perceive it. Whereas you use the right piece of music, and you enhance that, you make it seem really good. You use like an epic piece of music with like some crazy slow-mo, amazing thing going on. That looks awesome, but you use that same piece of music with like a baby crawling around. I guess that might be quite cool actually, but if you use that same piece of music with something like someone just washing tables, that's not gonna fit at all. And conversely to that, if you use some like country music to show someone like running away from assassins, it's not going to fit, and it lends a bad look to things and you perceive it less well. So music is super important. And the third part of sound I just want to talk about, and we could definitely do a whole video on this, is sound design. So this is adding sound effects to your overall video and to the footage. So for example, when you do a transition, let's say you do a whip pan transition, like you want to have that sound because you want to have an audio cue with the transition, because it's just the way that we perceive it. It just feels better. It feels more natural, and now it looks better. So you want to have audio cues with your transitions, but you also want to try and put sound effects in that match the footage on screen. So if you've got water on screen, you want to have water sounds. If you've got a bird, you want to have maybe the sound of birds, or the sound of a forest if you're in a forest, or something like that. It just adds to the overall look and the overall feel of your footage, and can just bring your video from kind of down here to amazing. And that is a huge thing that is overlooked, and is such a massive thing you can change right now and just make your videos look so much better. So tip number 3 is motion. So you want to generally try and have motion in the frame, so something moving, or that you want to actually be moving the camera yourself. So this isn't always true, and I just want to get that out of the way now, because I know some people will be thinking, well, I know that's not true. And that's very much the case. You can have some really cool static shots, and actually a series of static shots can be really dramatic and really cool. But for the most part, adding a bit of motion, so literally just moving the camera left to right, or just moving forwards or moving backwards, just makes it much more dynamic, and you can just pull the viewer into what they're viewing. It can make them feel like they're part of it, make them feel like they're experiencing it rather than just viewing it through a screen. So it's just a really easy thing to do as well. You can just pan a little bit, you can move around something, you can move towards something. Really easy stuff that's just going to add a whole extra layer to your videos and make them seem so much better. It also just looks more professional because you've taken the time to add in that bit of movement. It just makes a big difference. Tip number 4 is picking the right time of day of when to shoot. So on a day like this where it's really cloudy, it's not very nice, it doesn't matter as much because that cloud is going to act a bit like a softbox, so it's diffusing all the sunlight, and actually it's a really good time to go out and shoot. It's going to look really nice. But normally, on a normal day, that sun is going to be beating down and just ruining all of my footage. And I much prefer to shoot in the evening when you might get sunset. The sun's much lower in the sky has all kinds of colors, there's all nice colors everywhere, it looks really cinematic. The light is much easier to deal with and to use in your footage, and you just come out with much better looking stuff. So the exact same footage shot around sunset will look better than the same footage shot in the day most of the time. I appreciate there's times when that's not true, but for the most part, sunset stuff just looks so good. That light is so perfect for shooting video that it's be a shame not to use it. So tip number 5 is framing, and this is a little bit broader, and we'll probably do a whole video about it at some point, but adding things to the frame can really enhance the image and give you much more depth to what you're filming. So for example, if you shoot your subject through trees, again, this is similar to a tip from the 5 ways to improve your photography, but if you're shooting your subject through trees, you actually add some of those tree branches to the footage, you can have 3 things from that. You can have them framing the subject, which just leads the viewer's eyes to where they should be looking. It looks really nice. You can have them out of focus, so you've got that lovely out of focus element, also creates depth, foreground, subject, background, which looks really great, and it can amplify any movement. So if you don't want to move too much because you don't want to get the subject out of where they should be in the frame, if you have something in the foreground, like some tree branches or something like that, and then you move the camera ever so slightly, that movement's going to be amplified. The subject's not really going to move much, but those tree branches are going to give the impression of loads of movement because they are moving so much because they're so close to the camera. So that's a really, really nice way of adding in that movement while having framing going on, but without having to move too much around your subject. It also means you don't have to walk, which if you're shooting handheld, means you don't get all those bumps, which you don't want. So that's a really, really useful thing to do. Something that goes hand in hand with this as well is angles. So if you shoot everything from up here, it's not going to look as good as if you take the time, move the camera down to the level of whatever you're shooting. So if you shoot even something as boring as like a wall or just some plants, if you shoot at the level of those, it's gonna look so much better, so much more interesting, and so much more dynamic than if you're just shooting everything from up where you are. So just try and move the camera around to get different perspectives on things, and it's just gonna give you a much nicer end result. So those are our 5 tips on how you can be shooting better video right now. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any tips of your own, pop them down in the comments. I'd love to see them. If you liked the video, make sure you do hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe as well. And I'll see you in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.